Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes football webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Waljesper along with Tribune football beat writer David Morrison. David, Missouri goes to Toledo, comes away with a more lopsided than I expected 49-24 victory. Probably the main storyline coming out of that game was the play of Maty Mauk going home to a city about 75 miles from where he grew up and played high school football. He was impressive. Completes 21 of 32 passes for 325 yards, 5 touchdowns. He runs for another. Did have 2 picks, one of which was erased quickly by a nice strip by Bud Sasser. So one of them didn't hurt him, but he did throw a couple interceptions. And I think maybe the other stat which he continues to excel at is yards per attempt, 10.5 yards per attempt, which is outrageously good. So just your thoughts on how he performed and whether that maybe changed your opinion of him based on what you saw from him in the first game?
I really don't think so. It seems like some of the things that make him, I don't know, worrisome at times are the same things that make him so good at times. You know, it's just when they're going right for him, they go really right. I mean, it's confidence, it's arm strength and thinking he can make any throw, and it's unpredictability. And when those things are going poorly, like 10 of 25 against South Carolina, then he looks like a shaky quarterback. When they're going well, like Saturday, you know, he looks like a world beater. So I mean, he played the same as he did the first week, it seemed. It's just more things went right for him this time than they did against South Dakota State. I would say the one thing he did show was when he did have a pocket, he stayed in it longer than he did against South Dakota State. It seemed like he was more patient almost when the line did give him a pocket, whereas against South Dakota State and even early in the game against Toledo, it seemed like he almost felt phantom pressure a little bit and tried to get out when he didn't really need to. And I mean, that happened on his first interception. He kind of felt pressure that wasn't there and sailed a pass to Sean Culkin, who was covered, and you know that happened against South Dakota State too. But the rest of the game, I mean, he was just playing like he usually does. You know, he was throwing long and hanging it up there for receivers to go get. He showed he has a lot of confidence in his receivers by just kind of putting balls up there in single coverage and saying, hey, go get it. And they did, usually, for the most part. You know, he knew he had a lot of room to work over the middle because he said he saw in film study that Toledo's safeties like to vacate the middle, so he knew Jimmy Hunt would have a lot of room on crossing routes, and he took that a lot. And then, you know, he kind of used his run threat to kind of sucker him in sometimes, too, and especially on the touchdown to Darius White, that's what happened. I mean, he rolled out, the safeties came in to try to address that, and he just floated it over their heads. So I mean, he did the things that he's used to doing. It's just they all worked on Saturday, whereas maybe they didn't so much against South Dakota State.
There's really no argument with those numbers. I think sometimes people will maybe either, depending on whether you agree with him or not, are either nitpicking him or pointing out things that eventually are going to come back to haunt him, in that he does a few things that are a little bit unconventional when plays are going down the drain. He doesn't just throw the ball away. He takes a few chances. I think he tends to maybe lob the ball in the general direction of players rather than just gunning it out of bounds. So that may be the one concern people would have, is that at some point he's not going to get away with all these throws. I don't think that the deep balls he throws are even that dangerous, though. A, he throws them more accurately than he throws bubble screens. B, I think a lot of those situations they're in single coverage and they are the bigger man of the two, and if nothing else, they're going to be able to. It's probably going to be incomplete and not intercepted. I have no problem if they want to take a bunch of shots downfield. Where he might get into a little more trouble is the pocket's collapsing and he sort of lobs one over the middle. That's something that he does need to correct. But and you know, I think the first game, once he started scrambling the play, nothing went right against South Dakota State. He threw 2 touchdown passes off scrambles. One where he was sort of falling away and throwing off his back foot and still gunned one to Jimmy Hunt, and one where he kind of lobbed one to Darius White, which was a short one. So I didn't have much bad to say about Maty Mauk in this game, other than just maybe a couple early in the game. I thought maybe there's a couple times from above we could see guys wide open that he didn't seem to see, but I can tell you that it's a lot easier to see it from where we are than where he is. And he did get Marcus Murphy body slammed near his own goal line when he severely misread a sweep play. So
it seemed like the receivers were more help to him in this game than they were in the South Dakota State game too. I mean, like I said, the Darius White ball, he came back, you know, to get that 45-yard pass. Bud Sasser was just amazing for him. I mean, he had that 47-yard catch and then immediately got back and had a 25-yard touchdown on a screen. He had a play on the sideline for like an 18-yard gain where, he kind of cupped the ball off of the dirt, and then, he also, like you said, got the ball back for him on that interception by stripping Jordan Hayden. And then even, Jimmy Hunt worked really well, and he had a couple of drops, but when he was catching the ball, he worked really well underneath, and he had that one touchdown pass where he just kind of threw a swim move on the cornerback who had no idea what was going on. So the receiver play was, I think, a lot better than it was in the first week as well, and that's gonna have a lot to say about how good Mauk is this year too. Because last year for the most part, his receiver play was stellar when he was in, because they had really good receivers. And if Missouri's receivers keep playing like they did on Saturday, then he might be in store for some pretty big numbers this year.
And Toledo's corners were terrible. Those weren't their two starting corners were down. Those guys are bad.
Yeah.
They were really bad. They were guys who, once you blocked them, they stayed blocked, and they were guys who really didn't cover very well. So keep that in mind. But, that's not Missouri's problem. They did well against those guys. Second point, maybe if you really are wanting to find fault with Missouri, is that defensively they continue to get gashed for some pretty big plays. They're a defense that is sort of structurally set up to where they're willing to give some underneath passes. They're willing to give a certain amount of rushing yardage. They're not a super aggressive defense or a cover two defense, but they've been giving up big plays. Sometimes just on runs up the middle. Any consistent problem you've been seeing there as to why that's happening more than we've seen in the past?
Well, the common thread, it seemed like, in all three of those runs up the middle against Toledo, when Kareem Hunt got loose for, I think, 29, 38, and 45 yards on three separate runs right up the gut. And then also the Zach Zenner touchdown run. The common thread, I think, was people not in gaps. You could see just kind of on the replays of the Hunt runs, he would start off to the right and they would all kind of crowd, or he would start off, one direction, they'd all kind of crowd that way and get pinned in, and then there'd be a huge, gaping cutback lane that he would just take, and then it's off to the races. And like I'll get to in a second, the secondary didn't tackle very well, and so that was the problem on the big pass plays too. Toledo, I don't think they completed a ball that was in the air more than 20 yards on the game, but Missouri gave up probably 3 or 4 plus 20 or plus yard gains because, like, say there was a very emblematic one that was Alonzo Russell, their big 6'4" receiver, caught a little 8-yard stick route. Arian Penton came up and just kind of dusted his shoe tops off trying to tackle him, and he's off for a 24-yard gain. The tackling wasn't great in the secondary yesterday, and I think that's kind of what led to the big plays in the pass game. Whereas against South Dakota State, what was happening in the big plays in the pass game was they were airing it out and people were going up and getting it. So that's a different, I think, problem than they showed in the first week. And then in the run game, like I said, I think it's just kind of gap integrity. It's just people kind of overrunning the play and leaving the backside of it wide open, and Kareem Hunt having enough presence of mind to take it.
Mm-hmm. Part of the issue, obviously, is they're playing teams that are spreading them way out, which, a lot of teams are going to do that. That's kind of the way it goes these days. But there's sort of wide swaths of field these guys are responsible for. And in Missouri's defensive front, it's not really okay, you're in charge of plugging 2 gaps and just hold your spot and let the linebackers make all the tackles. Their defensive linemen are trying to get upfield and do something, and so once in a while you will be suspect to getting some cutback runs on them, especially as fast upfield as their defensive ends are going to go. If you can get inside those guys, there will be a few big plays. But I thought maybe the biggest thing, people got to get off blocks a little better. I know on the initial Kareem Hunt touchdown run, their lineman came out, hit Missouri's 2 linebackers and just stuck on them.
Yeah.
And you got to get off those blocks and make a tackle. And then the secondary, it was bad.
Yeah.
Those guys, Missouri secondary, there are some weaknesses as far as, I think, coverage skills, but if that's the case, you got to be good tacklers. They got to be better tacklers than they were, because they're going to face better teams than Toledo offensively.
Yeah.
Lastly, UCF coming to town. Don't call them Central Florida, UCF. They're a team that's only played 1 game. It was in Ireland, and they lose on a last-second field goal to Penn State, a team that won a BCS bowl game last year. That was when they had Blake Bortles at quarterback. He's off in the NFL. Just your thoughts on how tough a test will this be for Missouri, facing a seasoned team, I think a team that's got a pretty good program going, but now missing its star quarterback from the last few years.
It's, just from a personal note, I grew up in Orlando, so I grew up like 10 miles from UCF's campus, and it's amazing how far along that program's come since, they were in my lifetime they were 1AA and then they were 1A Independence, and then now they won the Fiesta Bowl last year. That's just a huge transformation, and I'm not that old, I don't think. Maybe I am, but anyway. But yeah, I think UCF is still a pretty stout test even without Blake Bortles. I mean, they seem to have figured something out with their backup quarterback, Justin Holman, in the second half against Penn State after they couldn't get anything going in the first half against him over in Ireland. He had kind of a Maukian line. He was 9 of 14 for 203 yards. So they've got big play potential in the pass game, and they've got a lot of their big-time receivers back from last year, too. That Rennell Hall, who is out, he'll be back, I think George O'Leary said this week. J.J. Wharton, who made the famous one-handed sprawling diving catch against Temple that got replayed a million times on the replays. Guys like that. So, I mean, they've got playmakers back in the receiving core. They're also replacing a 1,000-yard rusher in Storm Johnson, but they're supposed to have their top back, William Stanback, back, a lot of backs in that 5-word span. Anyway, this week after he sat out the season opener. And then they got most of their defense back as well, but again, I think Maty Mauk's going to have a lot of room to throw against him because Christian Hackenberg and Penn State threw for 450 yards against the secondary. So, I mean, I think it could be kind of a offensive, high-octane slugfest type thing. Like the Toledo game was, but maybe with a little more points on the UCF side than Toledo was able to put up.
Yeah, in the opener, Justin Holman, he didn't even start the game. He came in the second half because the starter, Pete DeNovo, was ineffective. They did not run the ball at all against Penn State. I don't know if that's something. It was a low possession game. They only had like 40-some plays, so they didn't have a lot of chance to do much anything. But that will be interesting if they can run it at all, if they try to run it much against Missouri. So that's one side of it. And then defensively, like you said, they got torched through the air. They only gave up 57 yards rushing, but they gave up so many passing. So that's happy news for Maty Mauk. I think this I probably going into the season thought the game at Toledo would be the toughest game just because it's on the road. Of the two remaining home games in the non-con, I would say UCF is going to be a tougher test from Missouri than Indiana. So I still think it's a game they should win by relatively comfortable margin, I would think, being more than a touchdown maybe. But we'll see.
Yes, we will.
Indeed, we will. All right, tune in next week. We will touch on the UCF game and look forward to the non-conference finale against Indiana.